This is Gloria Nelson. Pleasure to welcome Tim Plotner today for his FACS webinar that he's going to be presenting. One of the things that I'd like to do is to just share with you for a moment before you settle in and get ready for the start of today's webinar. Let me give you a brief introduction for TUG, the usergroup.org, for both our current members and for those of you who represent organizations that have not yet joined our online community of Infor distribution software users. You've heard the phrase before, knowledge is power. Well, I can say with confidence that after today's presentation, you'll be waking up tomorrow with a little more of both. But today is only one presentation. The TUG webinars, online forums, and member events facilitate the timely exchange of ideas and information to help you work smarter and with more confidence. And that, our friends, is a powerful combination. If you're currently a member, it pays to get more involved. And if you're not, please visit our website to discover why 2,300 heads are better than one to help you be the best at what you can do. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Tim Plotner, Director of Emerging Technologies at Earnest Associates and one of our esteemed network leaders. So at this time, Tim, I am going to turn this over and make you presenter. While we are facilitating this, I just want to hang on the line with you for a moment and let you know as soon as I get your screen in our sight line, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate that introduction and thrilled to be here with you guys. I just love the FACS community. I have for many, many years, and glad to be participating with TUG in presenting these lunch and learns. Just a heads up for everyone, next Friday, TUG will be hosting a town hall meeting for all the FACS users at noon again. You will be receiving information from TUG and an invite to that. This is a great opportunity for you to communicate with other FACS users and also to give feedback to TUG about ways that they can serve you better and ways that they can help meet your needs. They will be discussing things like what are the upcoming topics for additional lunch and learns. So please take advantage of that, and I hope that I will also be there with them. So to get into today's conversation, we're going to be talking about the sidebar. You'll notice that I've got my contact information here at the very end of the presentation. It will also be at that, and then this presentation is being made available to Gloria, and it will be, I believe, shared with everyone as well. If you notice me looking away from the camera, don't worry about it. I've got multiple monitors, and this is my laptop, which is the smallest monitor, but I'll be actually working with a different monitor, so that's why I'm looking back and forth. As always, I do greatly appreciate feedback and discussion. Those comments or questions that you might have should be directed to Gloria via the chat feature or whatever. I think it's just called the chat feature with the GoToMeeting. So please do that. She'll be interjecting at various times to share with me open questions, and we'll take those and respond. So to get started, let's start with just an intro to what we're going to be covering here. The sidebar is a feature that was initially released with FACS 9.2, excuse me, for the SO entry suite only. And we're going to go through that. There have been some things added to the SO entry suite sidebar in 9.3. And in 9.3, they also added the sidebar to the PO entry suite. So PO entry, receipt entry, non-PO receipt entry. So what the sidebar is, just to give you a general idea, is an exposable section beside the line browser, and I'm going to show it to you in a moment, in, say, order entry. So if you picture order entry, you've got the lines that you're entering. Over to the right of it, you can expose this other section, and there's a list of things that you can display or view while you're working in the order. There are three different types of views. There are views that are subject to or sensitive to the header information, like the customer, for example. that information doesn't change when you switch from one line to the other in order entry. There are also some views that are line sensitive. So as you highlight line 1, the information in your view displays the information relevant to that line. And on line view items or types of views, lines drag and drop is often available, and I'll show you that as well as we get into it, meaning you can drag information from that side over to the line browser to add a line, etc. And then there are a few views. One example would be the notes view, where it actually contains information that is relevant both to the header and to the line. And you'll see that as we get into it. And also in most cases, the sidebar data on that sidebar list, many times there's drill downs available, and I'll show you what those are as we get into it. So I'm going to exit the slide presentation and get into actual running facts. And we'll start with basically the way that you navigate or get to the sidebar. So we're going to start by loading a document that I have here. And if you notice, there's this new little button over here on the right, and that's what you'll see also in PO entry for opening this sidebar for PO entry. To open it, you just click on that, and you'll notice we've displayed this additional section and shortened or shrunk a little bit the line section. This can be moved back and forth to show more or less of one versus the other. What I prefer to do is then to really expand my main screen so that I can get a really nice balance, if you will, between what I'm showing in the lines versus what I'm showing in the sidebar. So that's just the basic functionality. This button that shows up over here is the refresh button. There are times where things might have changed while you've been editing, and a refresh just simply reloads that sidebar with the data that's current if you've been sitting in it for a while. And then you can collapse it again by collapsing that. And it does remember where you put it, where you put the slider divider. And when you exit and come back in, it remembers how you had this configured so that it restores it in the same way. So that's the basic mechanics. Now we'll get into some of the features here. And the first one I'm going to cover is the long-term surplus. Now I know that coming up, there's going to be a whole separate lunch and learn on dealing with surplus. So we're not going to get into a lot of the functionality, but I do want you to see what is displayed here. So this list is a list of all items in your initiating warehouse. We're initiating from warehouse 1 that have long-term surplus. Now, if you're not familiar with what long-term surplus, how it's defined, long-term surplus is any amount of available quantity that you have that's more than a 1-year supply of that item based on your usage values, what your average daily usage is. In Grant Howard's terminology, this is quantities of items that you want to divest yourself of. You want to get rid of them because they are taking up space in your warehouse and they're an unnecessary investment in inventory that should be pushed out because it's more than a year's supply. So a couple of things, this purchase column over here, it was added really to help you understand that this customer, in this case C100, has in the past purchased those items. And that provides you with an opportunity from a CSR perspective to say to your customer, hey, look, you know, we can run a special here. If you want to grab a couple more of this item, we've got some long-term, we've got this excess quantity, and you can make them a deal if you want to, et cetera. But at least you see what you have that's more than you need. Now, this order quantity is defaulted from past sales to this customer, or if there is no past sale, it defaults to a quantity of 1. That is the quantity that will be used if you drag it onto the line. Now, if you want So for example, 104 is defaulting to 40, but you didn't want to add 40. This is a case where you can double click on this line and it will ask you what order quantity you want. So I'll say 5. Now, when I drag this line over to and drop it on the line browser, it's going to add that line, I-104, with a quantity of 5 with current pricing. And that's just and you'll see that as over and over again, you've got the ability to drag information from here over to the line browser. Now, one thing is you'll notice that I-104's order quantity went back to 40. That's because that 5 that I put in isn't saved permanently. It's only for this current editing session and only for dropping onto the browser. When this thing gets reloaded, it resets the order quantity based on the past sales to this customer. So that's long-term surplus. The next one that I'll show you is some new features that I think you will appreciate here, and that's the standard order. Now, there is a new functionality that is available up under Options, Standard Order, and you have Import, Make, and Edit. Make is really essentially the first time you're creating a standard order. If you say make, it will take all of the items on your current order and put it onto the standard order with these quantities. If you select Edit, here are the items that I have on my standard order and the quantities, and you can put a note that you want to associate it with it, and it is based on the customer and the ship to. So you can, just like anything, edit and maintain the standard order for this particular customer and ship to here. Now, if you said Option Standard Order Import, it's going to pull all of the items from that onto this sales order. However, using the sidebar, you see what your standard order is. Okay, you see all of the lines on them with their notes, and you have the ability to drag and drop this. So I could add, say, for instance, I-302 onto my order just by dragging it over here, and it pulls it in with the standard quantity from my standard order with current pricing. Now, drilling down on any of the items over here takes you to standard order entry. So you can access standard order entry either via Options, Edit, takes you the same place as if you drill down on the items over here. So that's your standard order. You'll notice when we get to purchase orders that you have something very similar with purchase orders, and that is standard buy, and you'll see that it functions pretty much the same way. So that's your standard order. And you do have also, just for benefit's sake, it is on the menu as well. So you can go directly to standard order entry, and from standard order entry, you could put in C100, S100, and make your edits here. You also have some other functionality like copy it or remove, etc., that are in there. So that's your standard order. The next one is the timeline. Now, timeline is something that we added some time ago when we did the, I want to say it was 9.1, maybe 9.0. We added, but what timeline is a view of all of the future incoming orders, or in this case, it could be transfers, it could be work orders, any of those types of documents that are bringing in the item. Now, this is an item sensitive view, so this is relevant to I-100. If I select the I-103, that's all the incoming purchase orders with their dates, etc., for I-103. And it shows you the quantity that's coming in. And as you scroll out, this balance is the anticipated balance when this quantity is received. You can see that's going up by 4 and then by 3. One thing I did notice on here is that there's some things that are not filling out, and that might be data, it might be a bug that Infor needs to look at. But what is supposed to happen is, based on your average daily usage, it will show you how many days supply you expect to have when that comes in. And it also gives you a message, like in this case, it's saying that when that order arrives, you'll be above your long-term surplus point. Bump that out a little bit here.
Hey,
Now, the other thing, yes, ma'am.
Tim, a question popped up. Can there
Sure.
be multiple standard orders per customer, not by ship to, but maybe by some other category?
At this point, no, it's just by customer and ship to. So there's not different kinds of orders that are available. So good question. That would be actually a great enhancement where you can name, maybe give the standard order a name. So if it's a departmental standard order, that would be great. So back to the timeline here. What generally is supposed to happen with the timeline, if your data is all right, and I think that my demo data might not be supporting this, is that the average daily usage should be being dropped, be taken out of this balance for every day that passes, and so that you can see where your balance will be based on average daily usage coming out every day between now and when this is received versus the quantity coming in when it is received. So that's the purpose of the timeline. And what you have over here, you also see the safety stock and order point, all those things will show up here. Double clicking on one of these lines will take you to the appropriate inquiry view for the document that's in question. So in this case, it was PO number 1226. Drilling on this will pull me to a document inquiry for 1217, giving you the ability to really understand what's going on. And again, it's sensitive to that. So that brings us really, I sort of got a quick jump here on three of the, I think, what to me are some of the most important items in the sidebar for SO entry. And we're ready to take a quick break and see if there are any other questions besides the one we just took for standard order.
Yep, we have a few that have populated. Number one,
Excellent.
can you see LT surplus in other warehouses?
You can, but not on this screen. So if you come back over here to long-term surplus, that is an enhancement that I would like to see Infor make. In fact, I've actually suggested that to Infor, that this should be showing other warehouses as well. There are plenty of places elsewhere within FACS that you can see long-term surpluses, like the Buyer's Control Center and other places. This would be a great place to show that in other warehouses, especially if I'm shipping an item out of warehouse 1 and when I'm below long-term surplus and I've got long-term surplus in warehouse 2 and should be pulling that instead. So that's a great question. Thank you for that.
Okay, and the next question is, when you drag and drop from the standard order, what price does it use?
Current active pricing for that customer and ship to. So whatever you would get if you just added that item is the pricing that it'll pull.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And the final question that we have that's populated so far is, what if I want the entire standard order to be loaded at once?
Okay, that would be used with this options standard order import. So using that option, and I'll go ahead and do this, it's going to add a bunch of line items to my screen here. Import the standard order, I say yes, and it's going to go through every one of those lines. I'm skipping all of the companion items, but there you can see that I've pulled in all of my standard order lines, I-102 being the first one, 100, 30, 30, etc.
Okay, and Tim, I'm going to turn it back over to you to continue your presentation because that's what's populated thus far. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll take another break here in a little bit and cover any others that come up. All right, so the next one that I wanted to show you is the notes. I referred to this in my initial introduction as this is a place where you can see not just customer and header or item notes, but you can see sales order header notes and sales order line notes. So one of the challenges that we always had with notes is that it's not as easily visible that you've got notes, whereas the old memo line approach, you could see them in your browser, and so it made it a little simpler in some ways to see. Now you have to notice that these sticky notes up here are yellow instead of gray to indicate that there's notes on file. But with the notes view, you have the ability to see all of the notes that are relevant, whether they're header, what we call header entity notes, in this case, customer notes, sales order header document notes, which would be the SOEH here, line item notes, in this case, I-100, versus line notes for the actual sales order rather than for the item. So this puts them all in front of you and you can see them. And one thing I'll also point out to you is if you hover over this, you'll notice that the highlighted line here is this one. And down here at the bottom, this thing that popped up there is the actual full text of the note, the little pop-up tooltip. If I were to highlight item here and leave my cursor there for a second, it will also pop up with the full text of that item note, and that's seal alloy frame, etc. So that's a nice little feature. Also, double clicking on any of these will take you into either note entry or note inquiry, depending on what your security permissions are, to be able to edit or to just view the note in detail. I felt like this was a really nice addition to help make sure that you don't miss things. And notice that the customer information and the sales order header information, as I scroll through the lines, they stay. And as I come across an item that has notes, it'll show up in that. So there's the I-102 note, there's the I-100 note, etc. So that will update as you move through your document. So the next one down the line is item purchases. Now this is a little bit of a misnomer because really what this should say is purchase orders. And so this is purchase orders for the item that is highlighted. So this is a line view. So I-100, there are 2 open purchase orders for this item, and you can see the details on those purchase orders. You can double click on these and it'll take you to PO inquiry for them. This is similar to the timeline view because you're going to see all of these on the timeline view as well. So I really would prefer you just use the timeline view because it gives you more than just the purchase orders. It also shows you what your anticipated on hand will be at the time those POs are received. So that's this. It is sensitive to the line. So as you're scrolling through, you can see all the purchase orders that are open. The next one down is quotes. Now quotes is actually not a line view. So if you scroll through these, you'll see that it's not changing the quotes view. This is a header related view. So it's showing you all of the open quotes, and it's actually the quote line items. You'll see that there's 9988 is on here twice because there's 2 line items, and 766 is on here twice. These are all of the open effective quotes for the customer that you have here. Now, you can also drag and drop these guys. So if I wanted to buy or sell to this customer 2 I-118s, I would drop it on this thing, and it's going to drop my 2 quantity for I-118. Now, the one thing that I noticed that is problematic, and I've also reported this to Infor as well, is that it really should take the price. If I'm dragging it from a quote, it should use the quoted price as well. But it is in fact using the current active price, current default price, as opposed to the quoted price. So that's something I reported to Infor, but just so you're aware of it. You also have the ability to double click and it will take you to quote inquiry for the item that you have highlighted. So you can see all the details about that quote. So that's your drill down on quotes, that's your drag and drop, and the content of what it displays over here. The next one down is prior sales, or what we call what they've listed as prior purchases. That's also a little bit of a misnomer. That should say prior sales, because what this is the last sale that I made of any item to this customer. So it is not sensitive to what item I'm highlighting. It is just saying, what have I sold to C100? When was the date? What was the quantity, price, and what was the invoice that was sold on? So you can see really readily what's out there. Double clicking on any of these is going to take you to the invoice that is highlighted over here on the right. So 1777 will take me to past invoice inquiry for document 1777, and I can see the details there. You also have the ability to drag and drop from here, and it will use the quantity from the past invoice, but it will not use the old pricing. It'll use current pricing. So if I wanted to take I-109, drag it over here, there I've added I-109 to it, quantity of 5. So that's prior or past sales, really is more accurate. Another thing is you have the ability, of course, to under view show warehouse quantities display. This kind of thing always has irritated me because it generally sits in the way and gets in the way of viewing things. In the sidebar, you have the ability to show warehouse quantities. And so this is sensitive, of course, to the item that's highlighted. Now, this is where one of the earlier questions comes up about, can you see long-term surplus in other warehouses? You can, because as I scroll through these, you're going to see all of the warehouses that the item is in, as well as the short-term and long-term surplus of those items, as well as your on-hand quantity, your committed, your available, back-ordered, and on-order. So you see all of that data. That to me is a little bit more useful than that pop-up window, because not only can you see it all the time, you can just scroll through them without having to edit the line to see it, but it doesn't get in your way. Now, there is no drill down or drag and drop from this view, so if you double click, it's really not going to do anything at all. This is where I'll point out one other really nice feature that was added at 9.3. This was not present in 9.2, but at 9.3, if I'm editing a line, so let's say I go to add a line here, and I put in, notice that the sidebar is all grayed out when I'm in the item number field. But if I put in an item number, as soon as I tab out of that, the sidebar becomes available again and is populated with the information for the item that I'm entering. So here's the warehouse
Tim?
quantities. Yes, ma'am.
If I might interrupt you for a moment.
Absolutely.
A question just organically populated. What is the definition of short-term surplus?
Great question. Short-term surplus is really the available amount above your EOQ point. So if you look at economic order quantity and you're using that or not using it, economic order quantity is the amount that the system calculates is most advantageous for you to buy at a time based on the cost to carry, as well as the your transactional cost to do a purchase order. Short-term surplus point, or EOQ point, is that amount above your line point. So you go to line point, then you go up to EOQ point, which is basically anything above that is short-term surplus. Now, if that amount is higher than your 1 year supply, then it will take the smaller of the two, and long-term surplus and short-term would be the same number. But that's essentially what long-term surplus and short-term surplus are. What the goal there with short-term surplus is to say, I don't want to go buy something at EOQ and then immediately be told to get rid of it because it's over the surplus point. Okay, and that's the reason why it's that point above EOQ that you hit short-term surplus. Long-term surplus, again, based on Grant Howard's approach, is 1 year supply. Okay, good question. Okay, so that's the other feature I wanted you to see, because I can sit here and play around with this and look at notes, look at purchases, look at all of these things while I'm editing this line, which is a great feature that they added at 9.3. The one thing you can't do while you're editing a line or entering a line is any of the drag and drop features. So I still could come over to standard order, double click on this and get into standard order entry and come out and still be entering or editing my line, but I can't drag something from here and drop it because I'm in the middle of adding one line, I can't add another. So that's another feature I thought would be useful for you to see. So that was warehouse quantities. Most of the rest of these are really simple. We're going to go through them really fast. So you got contacts, which basically just shows you your customer and ship to contacts in a nice little format for you to see. There is no drill down or drag and drop. Resources shows you any resources that are on file for the header or the line item relative to the line item or the customer. And of course, double clicking on that will take you into the resource manager so that you can then view the document or whatever else that you've got. So that's resources. On order, this is another little bit of a misnomer. And we talked about the timeline showing you orders coming in. Usually when you think of the term on order, that's what you're thinking of. In this case, I think they named it incorrectly. It really should have been orders, open orders. So this really is showing you other sales orders that are present for the item that's highlighted. And that's really what that is. So if you want to see who else has ordered something and what is on that order, you can see that. Similar to that view, first of all, this view is sensitive to the line. There's a customer-centric on open orders. So open orders here, instead of showing you stuff that's sensitive to the line, it's showing you this customer's open orders. And so you, of course, can drill down on any of these. 1628, as an example, will take me over to document inquiry. And I can see information on those other orders and their reference numbers for this customer. Then you have companion items, and this is something you notice that this is called SO companion items. There's also one down here called PO companion items, and you'll see when we get to purchase orders that they added companion items for purchasing as well. So you can see the companion items. Once again, you have drag and drop for this. Drilling down on this takes you to item inquiry for the item that's highlighted that you drill down on. So that's the drill down, and you have drag and drop from there. We'll real quickly spin through price contracts, shows you any contracts that are open for this, that's relevant to this customer and not specific to the item, but specific to the customer. Customer items, which is the next one, shows you all of the customer items that are defined for this customer. So if a customer has customer items defined, they're going to be listed here. And you do have a drill down, which will take you into customer item maintenance, where you can maintain the customer item information. And there is not drag and drop for this, so you can see that. Now, price options, what's nice about this is the same information that you would get with the price search. If you edited this line and clicked on the price search, you're going to get the same information essentially. But as you can see, you have the ability to see it in a little bit, perhaps a little better way. There is no drill down on that. Yes, ma'am.
Question, is it possible to have a modification done to the titles/categories in the drop-down menu?
Absolutely, there is. Yep. Yep. And if we have enough time at the end, I can show you a little bit about that. But for now, it's very simple. It's all metadata based, so it's fairly easy to do. Lastly, there's PO companion items, and PO companion items is for purchasing purposes, but you do have a drill down, which takes you to item inquiry for the item that's highlighted, and you could drag and drop this onto your order as well. And finally, they added substitute items, which you see all the substitute items for the highlighted line. And these, of course, can also be dragged and dropped, and drilling on this takes you to the ability to change the quantity. So you notice the order quantity is here. It's defaults to 1. If I said I want 10, then I can drag this over. Likewise with the other ones, that is not saved. So with that, we're really at our second Q&A break. So let's see if we have any other questions.
We do. The next
Excellent.
question is, can I turn some of these features off for specific users?
I knew that question was going to come up, and that's a great question. It is possible to do that, but the way it's set up right now requires a little bit of a modification in metadata in order to do that. I have reported to Infor as well, as I was preparing for this, that these drill downs should be honoring user security, and I feel like I have to let you know that they aren't currently. So if you're looking at, for example, standard order, any user that's in here can drill down on this and get to standard order entry, which is really not at all what should be happening. This should be verifying that that user has authority or password or whatever needed to get into order entry, and that's not there yet. So I would, if you're concerned about that, which I would be, you should raise that to Infor as well. Okay, and being able to limit this to an individual user, again, if we have time at the end, I'll show you some of the metadata associated with this and what would be required in order to enforce it, even when Infor it doesn't have the fix in place for the drill down. So,
and we have another question that just
sure.
popped up. Is the on order a feature new on 9.3, or is it also available in 9.2?
This is available in 9.2. The only two on this list that are not available in 9.2 are the very last two, the PO and the substitute items. All of the other ones on here were introduced at 9.2. Okay.
And that's all we have right now. So I'm going to go ahead and let you get back to your presentation.
Okay, so we're going to jump out of order entry here, and we're going to go over to PO entry. And again, this is all of the PO entry suite. So, and we're just going to pull up this down here. Just like in order entry, you expose and by the way, let me clarify that all of this content that I'm about to show you is 9.3 only. So if I expose this, you'll see it acts the same way. I will bring this out here to expand it so it's a little more visible. And once again, we'll go start with long-term surplus. Now, in this case, it's showing you long-term surplus in the ship to warehouse. Just like in the other one, it would be helpful to know if you had long-term surplus in any warehouse. So I think this should be enhanced that way. And there's a couple other things that I've reported to Infor on this that, just so you're aware, is when this buy quantity is the amount you're going to purchase. It's defaulting based on previous purchases, but in this case, long-term surplus, when you're in a PO, you should be looking to return this quantity, not to buy this quantity. So this buy quantity should, if it defaults to anything, in my opinion, should default to negative the amount of the long-term surplus. So this should be at minus 107, that should be 90, not minus 956. So the way that I would expect you to use this is that you would use it by suggesting that you're returning things you want to send back to the vendor. Editing or double clicking allows you to edit the order quantity, but unfortunately that doesn't allow you to put a negative quantity in. But you do have drag and drop, so I could drop I-124 onto my purchase order, and it shows up, and then I could edit it to do a negative to return the item, if that's what I chose to do. The purchase column over here means that I have bought this from this vendor before, and the quantity is the quantity I purchased. None of those really are as meaningful. What would be important to me if I were to make recommendations here is that this should only show you items that can be purchased or returned to this vendor. It should show me anything that is on this order that I have surplus in another warehouse. So there's a couple things that would be really nice for this. I have suggested all of those things to Infor already, and hopefully they'll pick up on some of those. As I mentioned, sorry?
I was gonna just jump on here for a moment. We had someone who has a late question, just figured out how to type into the question bar. Is there a quick access to SOI or item inquiry on the sidebar during order entry? This poster said, I'm hoping I didn't just miss it, so.
Well, it depends on many of the lines. Come on, pull that up. If I could type, would be in good shape here. On many of the lines, if there's, depending on what you're looking at, like customer item, I think, if you double click on it, it takes you to, that's customer item. Some of these drill downs take you to item inquiry. Some of them, if they're showing you a sales order, when you double click it, it'll take you to SO document inquiry. There aren't any, like, just at any point kick off document or customer inquiry or document inquiry from here. It really is sensitive to what the view is and how Infor coded it to do the drill down. I will say though that you do have the ability, if you wanted to, just to have it up in, have it up in the background, go ahead and have it available and ready. There are also the ability on the go-to to get between these documents, but I know that's the inquiry. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think there's some views, and if you look at the PDF that's going to accompany this recording, that PDF illustrates or lists every one of these views and what the drill down does, so that you can see whether or not any particular view will take you to document inquiry.
Tim, Ralph Wallace just jumped in and he said inquiry syncs to a different session can handle that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, great point. So if you had SO document inquiry and you had that up, let's see, is there a sync in this? It would be through item inquiry. I think you'd have to go through item inquiry or customer inquiry and use the inquiry sync feature, and then have the view for SO doc inquiry open in that inquiry. So yeah, that's a good point. Not enough time to show all of that in this session. I don't want to run out of time for questions. But if we have time at the end, I'll be happy to pull that back up. Standard buy. So I mentioned standard buy as similar to standard order. So this is specific to the vendor. So you also, just like the other one, have standard buy, import, make, and edit. All three of those are available. Double clicking on this takes you to the standard buy list with the quantity, etc. So all of that functions exactly the same way. You have drag and drop. You can do standard buy import and pull the whole thing in, or edit and make. There are also links for standard buy into the buyer's control center, which we don't have time to show in detail. So you've got links for standard buy in various places. Similar to order entry, you also have the timeline over here. The same content. You've got the date that you're expected to receive it, as well as the document number, the line number, the quantity that's coming in, as well as the anticipated balance when those should arrive based on average daily usage. So all of that is present. Double clicking on this will take you into PO document inquiry so that you can view the details of those purchase orders. You also have then cost contracts, which shows you all of the relevant cost contracts for the vendor that's in question. So you can see all the various contracts. Drilling down on that takes you to cost contract entry. Once again, this should be protected by security, and it is not at this time. So we've got to get, Infor is going to get that in place very quickly, I'm sure. Cost options is very similar to the price options in SO doc inquiry, where you can go through it. It'll show you the manual cost and any breaks, effective expiration dates, all of that kind of stuff. Open purchases. This is open POs is what that is referring to for the vendor and the highlighted line. So notice this will change as I am scrolling through. So open POs for this vendor and this item. Now, in my opinion, I'm not sure, I didn't look at the code close enough to know exactly how they implemented this, but my hope would be that this would show you any purchase orders for other vendors for the highlighted line as well. I would really want to see any POs for that I-100, any POs for I-103, I-102, regardless of the vendor. I believe from what I saw that it's only showing you POs for the vendor that you have entering the purchase order for. So just some heads up on that. Double clicking on this takes you to PO document inquiry, where you can look at the PO itself. Past purchase orders is past purchase orders for this vendor. So it's not sensitive to the line. It's what have I bought in previously from this vendor, and you can see the amount, when it was ordered, what the ship to was, and of course drilling down on this takes you to the inquiry for PO doc inquiry. Similar to sales orders, we have resources. Exactly the same as what we showed you over there. Drilling down takes you to the resource manager. Notes is the same, where you can see both vendor and header notes, as well as any line or item notes that are present. And just like it just before, if you highlight this down at the below, you'll see that this popped up with the details of that line. Nice to have that tooltip there. Warehouse quantities, same as what we looked at before, pretty much the same kind of information. Same thing with contacts, same as what you saw, except this is vendor and ship from contacts instead of customer contacts. PO companion items, this is a new feature. So if you didn't know that that came in under purchase order, file maintenance, you have PO companion item entry. So just like item inquiry, companion items in sales orders, you have companion items for purchase orders. So when you purchase something, you also typically purchase something else, and that's what companion items for. We also have substitute items, and because it's easy enough to add it, they also added SO companion items here, so you can see the sales order companions or the PO companions for any of these items, and those of course can be dragged and dropped onto the document as well. Finally, vendor item numbers. So this is going to show you for the vendor a list of all items for which the vendor has vendor item numbers defined. And so if you needed to, I don't really know, I think it's hard for me to explain what this, the reason why we're getting the multiple vendors here for I-100 and not seeing item numbers. I didn't look closely at the code to see what that was doing, but that's what the intent was. The last one here, I'm not even going to show. BCC activity is another view. It just shows you anything that's in the Buyer's Control Center detail page for this vendor. So you can see what, obviously anything that's in the BCC is not currently active. It's not, no action is taken on it. It's not actually a PO or anything. It's a working environment, but that's that. So that brings us to conclusion of the details on the sidebar. We do have a couple things that we'll cover, but before I want to do that, I want to see if there's any questions, and we'll take those.
Yep, Tim, we have a question here that's populated. Can the standard buy be used in the Buyer's Control Center?
Yes, there is a link in the BCC. So if you come into the Buyer's Control Center, we'll just put in that I'll go in for V100 as an example. And you'll notice up at the top right is a standard buy option here. And so you do have the ability to go look at the standard buy, and you've got parent items, et cetera, up here. And I don't know exactly how you pull in those standard buy here, but it's there. That I didn't look really in detail on that, but it is visible at least from the Buyer's Control Center. What else you got?
That's all that's populated at this juncture. Is there
Okay.
any additional content that you wanted to move through or go back and revisit for?
Well, the one thing that did come up was the question of how you control what's visible and in the sidebar. And so I wanted to show you, this is all controlled. This is the sales orders side of it. It's all controlled by what we call a pick list. So this is really more appropriate for your programmers out there or your other folks. But here you can see each of the things that are out there. I, for example, went through and changed the display sequence to put them in the order that I wanted to show them in, rather than having to search around for each one. But you also have this exclude option, where if you're a programmer and you know how to do it, you have your channel partner do this for you. They could exclude it or hide any one of these by simply changing this exclude option here, and on whatever conditions they want. So that's just a little teaser for how the sidebar is controlled. And that's all the content I have, Gloria. Let me go ahead and pull up real quick my final slide. We're going to jump down here to the end and go into presentation mode. So you have my contact information, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. And with that, Gloria, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. I'm going to take control of the screen again.
Sure.
Make myself the presenter. And if you would be so kind to let me know when you can see my screen, I'll just make a couple concluding remarks.
Yeah, we can see
Tim and I were jesting yesterday about his title, About a Buffet. And so number one, we want to say thank you so much, Tim, for the bounty of content that you have provided us today. This is the first in our series of Friday of Facts features. In our TUG Connects 365 series, we look forward to having all of our Facts members join us today. Just want to let you know, Tim, that we had 51 users of the Facts platform that were here.
Excellent.
And before I make my final closing remarks, I think one of the things that's really important to point out with regard to TUG, for those maybe who are not yet company members of our organization, the ER system, or enhancement request system, the ER process, one of the things about TUG in terms of the user groups that are out there with other Infor products is that we have a very well-oiled machine with respect to socializing our needs to make sure that they get into the roadmap. So I wanted to point that out. But real quickly here, hold on a second, Tim. I'm seeing a question populate.
Sure.
Oh, he says, when will the session recording be available? The session will be available usually within 24 hours. We have to convert it and do a little bit of magic on our end. It will be posted to the Facts forum board, and following the post with a link for viewing, if you want to share that with your other colleagues, we'll also have the handouts that'll be posted immediately after the link for viewing on our YouTube channel. So those of you who are not yet TUG members, we would like to invite you to visit our website, theusergroup.org, and consider joining now. Your membership entitles you to not only all of our content, but probably one of the most robust things that we hear over and over and over again in value of membership are our forum boards for our members. You know, you can have a quandary that's stumping you in your position and post it to the forum, and typically within a matter of minutes, one of your colleagues at another company is going to jump in and give you some real viable answers to those pressing questions of how to work around a challenge or to fix something that you've bumped into for the first time. We have just so much of a wealth of knowledge within our organization. So again, for those of you who are not yet members, please go to theusergroup.org and just be aware that it's one membership fee for as many of the employees in your company that work on the Infor distribution software platform to access all of the great content that we have. So Tim, again, thank you for today. You did a great job. And we just want to say thank you to everyone for attending, and we will see you next Friday at our town hall. And again,
Excellent.
have a great day. And as they say in Hollywood, Tim, that's a wrap.
Thank you.